As the Golden Girls were well aware, cheesecake can solve a lot of problems. It's honestly one of the most popular desserts in America. A decadent concoction of cream cheese, sugar, and graham cracker crust. The Cheesecake Factory even built a brand on it. If you love cheesecake as much as we do, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more delicious stories, and comment below with your favorite kind of cheesecake. But, a question lingers. Why are some cheesecakes described as being New York style? What's the difference between non-urban cheesecake and conventional cheesecake? Should you, reject any that's not geographically identified? Say cheesecake. Cheesecake enthusiasts have German immigrants to thank for bringing the dessert to the States, though it looked slightly different when it arrived in the mid-19th century. That cheesecake was made with cottage cheese instead of cream cheese and a pastry-style crust instead of a crunchy crushed cookie or graham cracker base. According to New York Times columnist Eric Kim, at roughly the same time cheesecake was appearing on after-dinner plates, dairy manufacturer William Lawrence was refining Philadelphia cream cheese, a smooth version of a crumbly French cheese. Despite the name, it originated and was made in New York. Associating it with Philadelphia, known for its dairy, gave it legitimacy. These two things, German cheesecake and cream cheese, converged in the 1930s, when owners of Jewish bakeries and delis in New York City began substituting cream cheese for the cottage cheese found in German recipes. The switch necessitated a new designation. New York-style cheesecake was cheesecake with a cream cheese base, a modification that's since become widely popular. But, that's not the only thing that makes for a classic New York cheesecake. New York cheesecake may be definitive for some, but it's far from the only type of cheesecake available. What sort of cheesecake you consume comes down to three basic choices: the cheese, the crust, and whether it's baked. Italian cheesecake, for example, uses ricotta cheese and is baked. Chicago-style cheesecake adds sour cream or extra cream cheese. Some no-bake recipes use gelatin to set the cheesecake. Contemporary German-style cheesecake uses quark, which is similar to sour cream with a taste like yogurt. Pennsylvania Dutch style can be baked in a square pan with fruit as a bottom layer. Japanese cheesecake adds cornstarch. A New York cheesecake is more likely to adhere to the following. In addition to a cream cheese base, it incorporates eggs, lemon, vanilla, and a graham cracker crust. It's baked in a pan surrounded by a hot water bath to prevent overcooking. Devotees may also insist it sit and age for a few days before being served. For some, toppings are off limits. A chocolate or strawberry syrup drizzle might offend purists. Some deviations are permitted. One recipe might use heavy cream or sour cream in addition to cream cheese, while another might not. But that's broadly the type of no-frills cheesecake that can garner a New York-style classification. The end result is a dense and smooth texture. Other styles, like Chicago's, might be fluffier. If a cheesecake sits solidly on your spoon, it's probably New York style. If it wiggles, it's likely another variety. There's some room for creativity. Junior's uses a New York-style base but swaps out a graham cracker crust for sponge cake. That may be sacrilege to some, but Junior's sells 5 million cheesecakes annually. All cheesecakes, however, might arguably descend from Greek culture. One early version of a sweetened cheese mass was reportedly served to Olympic athletes at the first games in 776 BCE. Does peeing on a jellyfish sting actually help? If you want more myth-busting science videos, make sure to subscribe and never miss the truth behind popular beliefs. The sting of a jellyfish comes from specialized cells in the surface of its tentacles, known as cnidocytes. Each small bulb-shaped cell holds a nematocyst, a barbed thread-like tube that is filled with venom. On the outside of each cell is a tiny hair, referred to as a cnicocyle. When this hair trigger is disturbed, the cell's toxic harpoon explodes from its capsule and into the skin of the jellyfish's prey, or, an unlucky swimmer. The amount and type of venom, as well as the effect that it causes, depends on the type of jellyfish, the number of nematocysts involved, and the area and thickness of the skin they strike. Whatever the variables, a jellyfish sting is never exactly pleasant. What happens when urine is used to treat a jellyfish sting? Often after a human gets stung, there's a tentacle or two that gets ripped off and left behind on their skin. The first step to treating a jellyfish sting is removing the tentacles without triggering any unfired nematocysts and making things worse. Pressure triggers the cells, so you can't just pick them off. Whoever is doing the picking is just going to get stung on the fingers too. Certain chemical changes, like throwing off the salt balance between the outside and inside of the cell, can also cause the stingers to fire. This is why urine is often no good. Sure, urine contains salts, but it's just too variable. Concentrated urine might do the trick, and there are anecdotal reports from some sting victims that it helps relieve a bit of the pain. But if the person doing the peeing is well hydrated, the urine will be too diluted with water and make the stingers fire. What's more, while urine itself is sterile, it has to pass through the germ-laden urethra to get out, which could lead to a bacterial infection for the sting wound. The right way to treat a jellyfish sting. So, if friends lied to us after all and peeing on a jellyfish sting runs the risk of making matters worse, what should you use to clean and treat the wound? Vinegar is usually the way to go, just the plain white stuff with 5% acetic acid. It neutralizes unfired nematocysts, so they can't sting anymore, and some research has shown it to be one of the better post-sting rinses, especially when combined with the topical anesthetic lidocaine. When the 1-2 punch of vinegar and lidocaine isn't available, most folks don't usually bring vinegar to the beach, then salt water can also be useful for rinsing away the remaining nematocysts. Once the stinging cells are deactivated, the stuck bits of tentacle can be picked off or scraped away with a credit card. A word of caution though, vinegar might not be the best home treatment for jellyfish stings, depending on the one that stung you. Acetic acid can actually have the opposite effect on stings from the jellyfish lookalikes in the genus Phasalia, like the Portuguese man-o'-war. If you're not sure what stung you, your best bet is to just stick with salt water and seek help from a lifeguard or medical professional as soon as you can. So what did the Olympic rings actually mean? Back in 1894, Pierre de Frédy, Baron de Coubertin, a French aristocrat who had previously tried to bring more physical education into schools, called together a congress in Paris with the goal of reviving the ancient Olympic Games. It was actually an idea Coubertin first brought up during a meeting in 1889. But this time the Congress agreed on proposals for a modern Olympics, and the International Olympic Committee was soon formalized and given the job of planning the 1896 Athens Games. Want to uncover more fascinating stories from Olympic history? Hit subscribe and join us for more insights into the Games' incredible past. After the 1912 Stockholm Games, which by the way were the first games to feature athletes from all 5 inhabited parts of the world, a design of 5 interlocked rings, drawn and colored by hand, showed up at the top of a letter Coubertin sent to a colleague. Coubertin then used his ring design as the emblem for the IOC's 20th anniversary celebration in 1914. Just a year later, it became the official Olympic symbol. The rings were supposed to appear on flags and signage at the 1916 Games, but those games were cancelled because of World War I. The rings finally made their debut at the 1920 Games in Antwerp, Belgium. Coubertin explained the thinking behind his design in 1931, saying, "A white background with 5 interlaced rings in the center, blue, yellow, black, green and red, is symbolic. It represents the 5 inhabited continents of the world, united by Olympism, while the 6 colors are those that appear on all the national flags of the world at the present time." Coubertin actually used a pretty loose interpretation of continent that included Africa, the Americas, Asia, Europe and Oceania, and he never said or wrote that any specific ring stands for a specific continent. Since the rings were originally designed as a logo for the IOC's 20th anniversary, and only later became a symbol of the Olympics, it's also pretty likely, according to historian David Young, that Coubertin first thought of the rings as symbols of the 5 games already successfully staged. Modern inspiration for the so-called ancient symbol has sparked a lot of curiosity, honestly. Popular myth suggests that the rings were inspired by a similar ancient design found on a stone at Delphi, Greece. The ancient stone, however, was just a modern prop. For the 1936 Summer Games in Berlin, Carl Diem, president of the organizing committee, wanted to relay the Olympic flame from its lighting point in Olympia to the Olympic Stadium in Berlin. Diem, it seems, had a flair for theatrics, and included in the relay a stop at Delphi's ancient stadium for a faux ancient Greek torchbearers ceremony, complete with a faux ancient 3-foot-tall stone altar with the modern ring design chiseled into its sides. After the ceremony, the torch runners went on their way, but no one ever removed the stone from the stadium. 2 decades later, British researchers visiting Delphi noticed the ring design on the stone. They concluded that the stone was an ancient altar, and thought the ring design had been used in ancient Greece and now formed a link between ancient and modern Olympics, Young writes in Archaeology magazine. The real story behind the altar was later revealed, and Carl Diem's stone was moved from the stadium and placed near the ticketed entrance to the historic site. The inspiration for Coubertin's design seems to be a little more modern. 4 years before he convened his Olympic Congress, he had become president of the French sports governing body, the Union des Sociétés Françaises de Sport Athlétique, or USFSA. The union was formed from the merging of 2 smaller sporting bodies, and to symbolize this, a logo of 2 interlocking rings, one red and one blue, on a white background, was created and displayed on the uniforms of USFSA athletes. It seems quite obvious, says historian Robert Barney in a 1992 Olympic Review article, that Coubertin's affiliation with the USFSA led him to think in terms of interlocked rings or circles when he applied his mind towards conceiving a logo. Indeed, a ring logo that would symbolize his Olympic movement's success up to that point in time. Circles, after all, connote wholeness, the interlocking of them, continuity. Lords of the Rings. The IOC takes its rings very seriously, and the symbol is subject to very strict usage rules and graphic standards. For example, the area covered by the rings contained in an Olympic emblem can't exceed 1/3 of the total area of the emblem, and the rings must be presented in their entirety. The rings can be reproduced in a single-color version in blue, yellow, black, green, red, white, gray, gold, silver, or bronze, but for reproduction against a dark background, the rings can be pictured in yellow, white, gray, gold, silver, or bronze only.